Good morning, Connecting Point family. I hope your Friday has started well, and in an effort to start the day off as best as we can, I have the opportunity this morning to bring forward some devotional thoughts based on our Time with Jesus Bible reading plan, or Following Jesus Bible reading plan. And today we had, a reading out of Joshua and also Luke. And while I have a few thoughts about the Luke passage, I think something in the Joshua passage really stood out to me this morning, and so that's kind of what I want to spend our time talking about. And so this morning's reading was out of Joshua chapter 8 and then part of chapter 9, verses 1 through 15. And really, it was all of this collection, so both chapter 8 and this portion of chapter 9, that really stuck out to me. And it was the reason why both chapters are going to go into this thought is because of what takes place in chapter 9. This story of the Gibeonite deception, that's what it's entitled in my Bible. But the story of the Gibeonite deception has always been one that has stuck out to me. Always been one that for me, for some reason, has been kind of a head scratcher. Because when we just read the story on the surface and take it for what it is, this nation is very crafty and is super dishonest, but they do it in such a way that it is completely believable what they are sharing. I mean, they say that they have come from a long way off, and almost as if it's like they're coming and seeking Israel out because of the stories that precede Israel and the stories that precede the God of Israel. It's almost like they're acting as if like this is something that we want to be a part of. We hear how great your God is, and because of all these things that we've heard, we couldn't help but come and offer up some offerings to you and try to work together with you in what you're working to accomplish. And they get tattered clothes and sandals and moldy bread and old wineskins, and they do these things to make it seem like they have traveled from a long ways off, when in actuality they are right there, a part of the land that God has just instructed Israel to go into and to take over. And in the preceding chapter, just before this, in chapter 8, you have the people of Israel going into Ai and completely demolishing it. And then, just before that, you have them going into Jericho and completely demolishing it. And so it's like there's this template that has been established of what the Israelites are going to do, and they are going to walk into these cities, into these people groups who have kind of, I guess, for lack of a better term, been marked for death, and they're going to completely destroy them. And so Gibeon is no different. They have been marked for death. They are a nation that is to be a part of this group that is destroyed by Israel. And through some quick thinking, they managed to dishonestly land a treaty with Israel. And I've always read this story and thought to myself, man, how can you blame Israel? I mean, they had no idea. These people had literally, these specific people of the Israelite nation had never been to this land before. They didn't know who was where and what nation was a part of this land that they were supposed to come into. And so this was an honest mistake that they made, right? Like this was a group they were supposed to destroy, but instead they made this treaty with them, promising that they would never attack them and that they were going to be allies. And so it's like they went against what God had desired of them, what God was directing them to do. So they were being disobedient, but how can you blame them for their disobedience? Because the people in association with this disobedience were being dishonest to begin with. And so I think I've always read this and in a sense kind of excused Israel for this mistake that they have made. But as I was reading it this time through, verse 14 and 15 kind of stuck out to me, specifically verse 14 though, where it says, the Israelites sampled their provisions, so sampled the provisions from the Gibeonites. The Israelites sampled their provisions, but did not inquire of the Lord. And then what was the result of that? Then Joshua made a treaty of peace with them to let them live, and the leaders of the assembly ratified it by oath. And so, I guess as I read those two verses, I came to the place where I recognized that the deception, while the Gibeonites were deceptive, in no way, shape, or form does the blame of this mistake fall squarely on the Gibeonites. In fact, I would actually venture to say that the blame falls squarely on the shoulders of the Israelites. These people, specifically Joshua as the leader, but then also the leaders of the assembly, receive this delegation of the Gibeonites. They hear what they have to say. They partake in what they have brought them as quote-unquote gifts that are rotten and disgusting and old. And immediately from there, they make a decision to partner with this group. How does that add up? Like, how does that make sense? How does it make sense that that is the order of operation that the people of Israel should follow? Again, you go back to chapter 8, and Joshua and the Israelites had just overrun Ai, and in the process of overrunning Ai, there's a strategic military plan that was in place that Joshua had outlined, and in the process of executing that military plan, God tells Joshua, raise your spear. And because here, let me actually read it directly. The Lord said to Joshua, hold out toward Ai the javelin that is in your hand, for into your hand I will deliver the city. And what does Joshua do? So Joshua held out toward the city the javelin that was in his hand. And where is it? A little further down, I didn't underline it. Somewhere it says that he actually did not lower the javelin until it was completed, like until all of this was over and he had won this attack. And so it's like Joshua, in the midst of a military attack, when things are happening like crazy, he's in the middle of actually running away from the people of Ai, or the men of Ai, the military of Ai, so a stressful moment. He has time and takes the time to actually hear God speak and hear God lead him into what he is to do next. But then just a chapter later, a delegation comes to him, and he has 3 days. This isn't a decision that is made immediately, but it is 3 days later. They make this treaty. And never once in that time period did they think, you know what? It's probably a good idea for us to stop and seek what God has to say about this. To seek what God has to say about this relationship that we're going to enter into, this treaty that we're going to enter into, but this relationship, this covenant that we're going to enter into. And so everything that follows the thorn in the side that the Gibeonites become to Israel is a direct result of the disobedience, and I'm going to call it disobedience, the disobedience of Israel to actually take the time to consult God. And when I think about it in those terms, I look into our life and I wonder, how often do we do something very similar? How often do we make decisions on where we should go or what we should do using our own instincts and our own intuition? Even more dangerous, how often do we do that and then write it off in our minds as what God would desire because God has given us a rational mind to think, and so obviously I have submitted it to God because I've thought through it as diligently as I can. And now, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that God has not given us the ability to think. I'm not saying that God has not given us the ability to rationalize, and so any time we think through things on our own that we're being disobedient. That's not necessarily what I'm saying. But I am saying that we have a responsibility because we don't know what's out there. Because we don't know what every opportunity and every decision actually brings. We don't know what's behind it. We don't know when the next decision that we're being faced with is actually going to be the Gibeonites who are putting on a front and acting like one thing when in actuality they're another thing. And so we have a responsibility that every time that we are faced with a decision, to take that decision before God and ask God, is this what I'm supposed to do, or is there something else? Because if this story is any model for us, any indication of what things could be like for us, if we are not careful, if we begin to make all of our decisions based on our own intuition and our own rationality, we could find ourselves in a place where we are having to live with decisions that God would have never intended for us to have to live with. We may have to live with a thorn in our side like the Gibeonites because we have now entered a covenant relationship with this decision when it was a decision that God would have never had us made to begin with. And so I think about this and, maybe this sounds silly. But man, every decision that we make, we ought to be taking it before God. Whether it's something like what classes we should take, whether it's something like what job we should take, whether it's something like what we should do at our job, maybe what friendships we should be entering into, what romantic relationships we should be having, who our spouse should be, how many kids we should be having, if we should even be having kids. I mean, these are questions that I think so many of us, and when I say so many of us, I'm not pointing a finger at anybody, trust me, I am pointing fingers at me. And if you were to talk to any of the teens that I've had the privilege of ministering to over these last number of years, I mean, they will tell you that I have had this conversation with them about how, I never once asked God about my spouse. It was an assumption. Now, that's not me. Natasha is sitting right here, and she's hearing this, and she'll say the same thing. That's not me saying anything against her. Our marriage has been incredible, and God has truly blessed me with an amazing spouse, but never once did I take the time to say, God, is this who you have for me? It was just a decision I made. And in my life, really up until the day that I accepted my call to be a pastor, everything that I had done in the realm of professional decisions, that was all my own decision. It was always me trying to force a door open or me trying to step through something else, and never once did I stop and ask God, is this what you have for me? And I got to be honest with you. Some of you know my story, some of you don't. Man, things would have gone a lot easier if I would have just stopped and taken the time to ask God, God, is this what you have for me in relationship to a job? So regardless of where you find yourself in life on a continuum, whether you're a student in school, in grade school of some sort, or in college, a young professional, a middle-aged professional, a retired individual, it doesn't matter what stage of life you find yourself in. It is never too late to start doing exactly what Joshua did not do. And it's never too late to always surrender every decision that we have unto God. And so today I encourage you guys, as you go out into your day, as you take a step out the door, if you're having to go to work, for those of you that are essential employees, thank you for continuing to work in the midst of what we're going through right now. So if you're getting ready to step out the door and the decisions that you're going to make today, surrender those decisions to God and seek his face. If you're going to be around your house today and you're trying to decide what you ought to be doing, surrender that decision to God and see if that's what you ought to be doing. Whatever it is, guys, I just encourage you in the days to come and the days ahead of us, take the time, instead of just trying to rationalize through things, and submit those thoughts, those questions, those decisions to God. Because, again, if this story is any warning for us, I sure would hate to make a decision like the Gibeonites and then have to live with that for the rest of my life. Well, I hope you guys have a great day today, and again, take the time. It doesn't take long. It can happen in the midst of the heat of the battle. Take the time to seek God's direction today in everything you do. Talk to you guys later.